2014's Divergent, the first movie, review, and thoughts. So, as per usual, gonna start with a completely spoiler-free review, not spoiling the movie, not spoiling the book. Will warn before I get into the spoiler-ridden thoughts section, so up until that point, completely safe, nothing will be spoiled. Following a vague conflict that many can't even really explain in any kind of satisfactory way, America is a dystopian dictatorship where people are defined by the government based on the way they were born, whether they like it or not. Oh, I was talking about the movie. You didn't think I was referring to Trump's second term of however many they manage, did you? That's right, today we are looking at Divergent. This entire trilogy of movies was requested by a longtime supporter and personal friend, Arts Cafe, who has demonstrated truly Herculean patience waiting for me to get to these, and because of that I intend to do one per month of the movies he's requested until I've done all of them. So next month will be the third Twilight movie, Eclipse. The month after that will be the second Divergent movie, aka Insurgent, then back to Twilight, etc. until I've done all, after this one there's 5 more. So yeah, happy Women's History Month. This film deals with a 16-year-old girl coming of age as she struggles against societal expectations that are very biased against her gender, age, and social environment, things that she had no control over. Now, I will be comparing this to the Hunger Games, especially the first one. It feels unfair to me to compare the first in the series to sequels of another series. But yeah, Arts Cafe specifically, compared these two franchises and said that these are the Divergent trilogy are the better movies. I haven't watched 2 and 3 yet, but yeah, certainly this one really solid, better than Hunger Games in a lot of ways, and gonna try to cover some of that. So yeah, the Hunger Games 1 and this both are the first time that a lot of people are seeing these individual universes, so they have to give a strong introduction to that, whereas the sequels can rely on people already being familiar with the first one. And yeah, some of the ways that this is better than the first Hunger Games, you get a much better sense of how the world is set up, what the potential failures are outside of death, the system that keeps things in place. And I should specify, I am talking about Hunger Games the movies. I do think Hunger Games the books, honestly, overall, I think I like Hunger Games 1 the book about the same as Divergent 1 the book, but yeah, movie-wise, Divergent is better. And let's see, yeah, I don't know why the Hunger Games movies, I still, really love them, we're so deathly afraid of including even a little bit of voiceover narration. This one does not share that fear, which is perhaps appropriate because it is in part about mastering your fears, and it helps a lot because some of these things, it's just difficult to explain without using, just literally having a character explain it, and it wouldn't make sense for a character to be explaining it to another character in the world, and there is no character coming in from the outside. This is, more like Star Wars, where everyone is part of that universe, rather than something like The Matrix, where the protagonist is as new to this world as the audience. And yeah, Hunger Games made an attempt to do this with visuals. Some stuff just didn't translate well. This one does also use visuals, and, both of them do, some stuff is taken from monologue and inner monologue, and turned into dialogue where that works. There is way less of Triss's internal monologue here, but it fares better a lot of the way. While I do still love Jennifer Lawrence, I absolutely will grant that, at least here, I haven't watched enough to say if it's in general, Shailene Woodley's acting is better. And in general, the acting is quite good here. There's a lot of subtlety on account of people having to keep secrets. It's also better filmed and edited than The Hunger Games, at least the very first of those movies. It is, of course, slightly unfair because this one had the benefit of that movie's hindsight, but yeah, that movie really suffers due to the handheld shaky cam, which is in part there to cover up the violence, and then the sequels just imply the violence. This one does that as well. And, the implication, it also manages to capture really well the sense that everyone is watching you and judging you in a way that Hunger Games sometimes goes for, but this one really nails it. And, you know, it does that. It does other things that matter a lot to teenagers, perhaps especially teenage girls, not judging, but less to adults. And since these are especially made for teenagers and teenage girls, I don't see any kind of problem with that. And let's see, yeah, other than the aforementioned, there's also the romance, the idea of being special to the point of practically being unique. The fact that doing well can get you penalized, you know, that is something, you know, I try to listen to women's lived experience, and that's something that you hear a lot. You know, and I suppose, okay, to be fair, there is some of that going on for us men as well, but it's especially bad. I would argue that for us men, at least those of us who are cishet and white, you know, and native born, not immigrants, there is a way for us to, you know, it's practically impossible for us or anyone not rich to live up to all societal expectations, but there is a way for us to do things where we can be largely accepted, and for a lot of women that's just not the case. And let's see, I think, yeah, and some of the, you know, yeah, the movie does these things quite well, the stuff that is especially for teenagers and teenage girls, and some of it is less shoehorned in than Hunger Games. Ultimately, there is at least one scene that they filmed and edited but had to cut because it would have gotten them an R rating, and it's really too bad because it's actually important. You know, it shows something significant that happens to a character that, you know, had some screen time, and, you know, if you don't watch that deleted scene on the DVD, or I don't know if it's all on all DVDs, it was on mine, or listen through the audiobook, you know, both of which I did, you won't know why that character just suddenly isn't there anymore. I understand why it would have gotten an R rating. I understand that decision. I wish they would have filmed and edited it just slightly different so that they could have had it in there. Maybe filmed some backup dialogue that explained what happened so it was off screen. But it is not a pervasive issue. And let's see. Right, I suppose this is a perfectly decent... oh, never mind. Yeah, I'll get to it shortly. Anyway, I've seen some say this has less action than Hunger Games. I disagree. If we're talking about the first movie, perhaps less so than the sequels. Certainly the action here is more varied, better filmed, easier to follow. There's a lot of individual scenes of tension for physical safety, where in Hunger Games, the first one, it's more this ongoing simmering tension of the overall society, which is also present here, and then, you know, the games themselves, but a lot of that is less, like, immediate and more like, oh no, something might happen, where here, it's like, oh no, this is 100%, like, you know. I've also definitely argue the ending of this is better than Hunger Games 1, and I will go into detail in the spoiler section for obvious reasons that I will not be going into details before I get into the spoiler section. This is a good time to talk about, yes, I listened through the entire audiobook. I consider this a good, at times great adaptation of it, and certainly it's one of those things, if you like the book, I recommend the movie, and vice versa. I'm not going to mention all the differences. There are some changes. It's one of the things is it has to trim out a lot of stuff because, you know, the book is about 11 hours, and yes, some of that is the fact that it's also describing things that, you know, sometimes they'll spend a number of sentences describing something that when you watch the movie, it's you immediately pick up on, you know, because visual versus verbal, but there is stuff that they had to trim out, and I think by and large they did a good job picking the stuff that, excuse me, didn't, yeah, that isn't crucial to understanding the whole. You know, it is one of those things where ultimately there is more depth and background in the book, difficult to get it all in. You know, it is one of those things. I hope at some point they start, well, I suppose they don't really make these too much anymore, but if they at some point start back up, I think it would just be good to just split each book into 2 movies, because I do think the 2 parts of Mockingjay is some of the best as far as fitting everything in that translates well. There is also stuff they have to change because some stuff works well on a page, not as good on a screen. Now, Miles Teller and Jai Courtney continue to do really well at playing complete a-holes. The character name of Miles is Peter, and on account of his grin, I like to call him Peter Shit Eater. And yeah, Jai is almost as good at playing a jerk as he is at appearing in movies in significant roles that end up either not getting sequels or not getting as many as obviously had been hoped. Like, the poor guy is cursed. This Die Hard, Terminator, Alita Battle Angel, Suicide Squad, like, holy crap. And yeah, both of their characters are ones we're meant to hate, and they absolutely succeed at that. Like, I've liked both of them in other stuff, so it is very much the acting and not just like, oh, they're just jerks in real life, you know. Actually, I saw someone put it really well. Miles Teller is a strong personality, and some people don't respond too well to that, you know. On the commentary track, the director assures us, you know, the changes they made, you know, the decision was never made lightly. And let's see, ultimately we do end up with a chunk of the movie that is somewhat samey. It's a part that would be very difficult to remove, and they try to include as much of it as they can, which can make it feel somewhat uneven compared to other parts of the movie. And I can't really get into detail without spoiling, but I will just say it is a difficult thing to work around. I'll try to get into it in the spoiler section. This introduces the central antagonist of the movie sooner than the book does, which I think was a very good idea. I don't want to give away exactly who's playing the character. I will say the character has this quiet menace that is very effective. They don't have to raise their voice or even openly threaten someone to their face. Oh, I feel like, did I say? The love interest here is more compelling than Hunger Games as well. The direction is quite strong. Each scene, you can really tell what they're going for, and most of the time they get there. There are times in the first Hunger Games where I really don't know why they made a certain decision. Like the fact that they keep cutting back to the flashback. We see, like, piecemeal the one particular flashback. That's not spoiling anything. I don't know why they didn't just show it the one time. And there's nothing that I found quite such a strange decision in this movie at all. The cinematography, you know, free of the shackles of shaky cam, which I acknowledge sometimes works really well. I don't think it was the right choice for Hunger Games 1, but this one, not doing that, they're able to do these somewhat more classical kind of cinematography things, and it works really well. You know, framing, camera motion, lighting, there's some really great stuff. And let's see. The editing manages to keep things moving very nicely because it does have to cover a lot of ground. It takes place over some time, and they do a good job with that. The music is fairly effective, and I think that is more. The effects are good. There's not. That was also something. The Hunger Games 1 has some very dodgy CG. And so I already mentioned, you know, it's PG-13. They have to imply some stuff. I think it did a good job because there is some stuff here that could have gotten it an R rating if they went further with it. They push it as far as they can, and by this point, the PG-13 rating had been pushed. You know, this was the same year that Captain America Winter Soldier came out, and also the, let's see, third, I think, of the Hunger Games movies, both of which are more, it's implied violence, but there's more violence there than you might expect from a PG-13, which was literally created to say, don't worry, this is not super violent. It was that thing about, it was a middle ground between R and let's see, PG, I think. Yeah, PG, which did not imply you should probably be 13 before you watch that, let's see. Yeah, I think that is what I should detail about that. Yeah, just they do a really, really great job throughout this. I am really, really excited to see where it goes next. Yeah, it has a very satisfying ending, but one that also tells you, the story isn't completely over. It resolves enough of what's been going on in the movie up to that point that it doesn't feel like, oh, they just, they didn't cut a book in half here, very clearly. I think that might be it for the review itself. Right, never unhappy to see Zoe Kravitz in something. I don't know if they just thought, we gotta have a Kravitz if we're gonna make something somewhat similar to Hunger Games work, but, I'm not complaining. This was actually, like, I guess 2 years after she wasn't in The Dark Knight Rises, because someone was racist and was like, we don't actually need an urban cast member for this role, which, like, wow. At least she did get to be in a Batman movie, more recently, where she absolutely killed it. Like, holy crap. This is a very different character, but yeah, she's great here as well. Right, they did a really great job on, like, yeah, the various characters. They felt the way that I pictured them in the, when I listened to the audiobook, so very nicely done there. I think that might cover everything. Yeah. This is 8 Divergents out of 10. And yeah, with that, I will get into the spoiler section. Okay, so from here on out, there will be 100% spoilers for Divergent 1, book and film. You have been warned. Possibly cursed. Sorry, I need to stop messing around with the occult. I do not know what I'm doing. So, yeah. Once she's administered the test, the number of Beatrices grows at an exponential rate. 2, 3 trios, truly a trillion trisses. What are people saying about Marcus? Oh, it's an old accusation. Some say he had no business playing the Punisher or doing Star Wars. It's absurd, of course. Seriously, R.I.P., you absolute legend. The first thing I will teach you is if you want to make it here, you keep your mouth shut. Do you understand? Yes? What did I just say? Demerit. What makes you think you can talk to me? I don't know. The screenplay? I love that the depiction of the Dauntless fits really well for cops and military if it's viewed through a lens that has this mix of reality, sometimes heightened, the way that a 16-year-old, especially one that wants to join, pictures, and the way things are in a dictatorship. Obviously, in real life, they're not jumping onto and off trains to travel, which, by the way, in the book, we actually see some people who didn't make the jump off the train, their bodies messed up from it and dead, obviously. They? What do you mean, they? You know, they, that vague, ever-changing group that conservatives blame for everything, including and especially the things conservatives themselves cause? Those people. So, I myself am not into dudes, but I do absolutely understand why those who are might be super into Theo James, you know, just gotta make absolutely sure I got the name right. I'm pretty sure, but not 100%. Theo James, yes, as 4. You know, he has this, like, he can be kind of bossy and you know, domineering and such. And there's also this sort of charisma to him. Like, he's not, you know, yeah. I feel like the actor does a really, really solid job there. There's some actors who can't quite pull off that mix, you know, and, you know, if you have someone who's, like, bossing people around but is completely devoid of charisma, you'd say, oh, they're just a jerk. And if someone has a lot of charisma but doesn't really feel like they're in charge, you know, I'm not saying people like that are not appealing, but it's a different kind of appeal, you know. I really appreciate the, you know, once Triss joins Dauntless, like, fairly early on, she's like, it's exciting, because, you know, jumping onto and off trains, and there's, you know, she's being welcomed. There's that thing about, you know, the leader, let's see, it's the Mekhi Phifer character, Max, you know, comes in and says, you know, welcome, and then she and Christina are, like, lifted up by a bunch of other, you know, and she's smiling, and you can tell that this is unfamiliar territory for her. You know, abnegation are not usually known to celebrate things, you know, not even allowed to look into a mirror for too long. And then, you know, smash cut, metal banging against metal, and the training starts, and you know, from right away, there's some really intense stuff. So, yeah, really, really solid stuff. Also, this thing of, you know, the tension surrounding, you know, having to jump onto the train, having to jump back off it, and these, you know, there are several things there where there is some really great tension and some really strong release of that tension, you know. Very nicely done there. Yeah. The character played by Jai Courtney tells them to get the F in the pit because he doesn't give an F. And yeah, the knife throwing, very, very tense. And yeah, the Peter fighting her after, yeah, you know, he's clearly Jai Courtney's character is getting revenge. I will say, it was so deeply satisfying. Both of them play these just complete a-holes so well. It was deeply satisfying seeing, you know, the paintball, like, you know, the little things that simulate the pain of a gunshot. You know, especially because Peter's like, oh, will you tell me how this, you know, what this feels like, or something like that, you know. They say your life flashes before your eyes, will you let me know? And then, you know, Trish shoots him, then Chris shoots him. That's, yeah. And they laugh, and it's like, oh, that was fun. Just, yeah, that was a really great, yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I appreciate that. Right, some of this is out of order. Let's see. Yeah, the thing with, you know, Trish is going home to see her brother. And, you know, he seems to have bought into the propaganda, or possibly be lying since they're in such a public place. And let's see, the thing with, yeah, Janine. You know, the thing with, you know, Triss is fighting off these guys, and then Janine, you know, calls out, and for a second we're like, oh no, you know, is she in trouble? And Janine's just like, are you okay? You know, there's this great, like, sort of gentle, you know, she's in charge, but she'll feign this sort of concern, you know, very, very nicely. And yeah, you know, she can only see the negatives of human nature, which is why she's looking for sex offenders. And she even uses the word eradicate about, human nature, which, yeah, major red flag. That's a pretty clear sign someone has, some fascist sympathies if they're using terms like eradicate about things like human nature. Like, if you're saying eradicate about, like, cockroaches, like literal cockroaches, I don't mean, people who've been compared to, insects and such. Yeah, that's one thing, but yeah. Let's see. I think that does. Yeah. Really, really intense when the attempt to throw her in the Grand Chasm, and yeah, he apparently suicides not very long after from the guilt and the shame and the fear of becoming factionless. And that also really nicely shows, when you push people, far enough, eventually something bad might happen. And it is this thing of, if the Dauntless are like the military, this is him having been broken down and not built properly back up. He is like a scene or two away from being found, with his rifle, with a very sinister look in his eye, and R. Lee Ermey's character running in to solve things the only way he knows how. And I think that might, the scenes of the hallucinations were really well done. They pushed them about as far as they can on a PG-13, but they're still, they're not as long as, but they are effective. And, they do actually manage to show some really, it's like, yeah, the fact that they were able to show something so close to drowning on a PG-13 is, yeah, years ago they wouldn't have been able to do that, but I'm really glad that the PG-13 has been pushed in more recent years, including back when, I realized the movie's like, 11 years old by now. And the, I will grant I've never been the best at telling the difference between those two birds. So the ones that Triss is running from, that she is afraid of, I don't think they're ravens, because, like, why would she fear Raven Software? She's so similar to Kyle Katarn in personality. But they might be crows, because there are too many of those movies. And yeah, it was, the bit where they go into they both go into 4's mind, and we learn his name is Tobias, which in the book she actually, every time her inner monologue refers to him after that, I think every single time, it's, she's using the name Tobias, not 4, even though before for a while, forever, she was referring to him as 4. And yeah, he's, he points out the difference between what a Divergent and what a Dauntless would do in these circumstances. And it does make sense. She's like, well, if this isn't real, we can just jump down. But a Dauntless wouldn't realize it was real, and jumping to what appears to be your death, that's not a Dauntless thing. That's, yeah. That does not make for the most useful member of the military. And, the thing about, having to shoot this innocent person, which again, really underlines the fascism. That's the kind of thing that fascist leaders want out of their military force. And, 4 notes, I keep hearing, good soldiers follow orders. Okay, so a lot left to cover. Not sure I'm going to get to absolutely everything. If I missed something, please ask me in the comment section. I'm happy to talk more about this movie. Yeah. For a little while, it looked like Triss was cut since she lost to Peter. She simply wasn't high enough on the board. Oh, NVM, the CTF put her OTT. Triss, this injection amplifies your fears. I want to warn you, it has been known to get people to vote for Trump as much as 3 times. I quite appreciate that the villain is someone who has a lot of knowledge but no empathy. That is indeed one of the big problems with, for example, fascism. The complete lack of empathy and such enormous control that is completely unguided by empathy. And again, I'm not talking about Trump. He has almost no knowledge. And BT Dubs, someone just recently uploaded the amazing monologue from The Great Dictator. Let's see if I can... I'm going to see if I can real quick find so I can actually credit the... let's see... the actual YouTuber who uploaded it, but I am struggling to find it, so I might just move on. Okay, I'm gonna do one quick pass, and then we're going to move on. That is so... Oh, there we go. Yes. Cinema Sticks. That's Sticks with an X. Just uploaded. Yeah, just fantastic. Kyle Colgren also did a really great video on... I guess he kind of talks about the entire movie, but yeah. 2 fantastic videos, an amazing movie. I am planning to do an entire video talking about it at some point. It's a long list. Let me know if you would like me to put it very soon in the schedule. I am very happy to do that. Lot of great talent on display in that and other of Chaplin's works. Now, early in the movie and book, the factionalists, who are basically the equivalent of unhoused, are othered in an uncomfortable way, but then by the end of the story, in both of these, both book and movie, we see the protagonists become factionalists, so they wanted us to understand the fear of becoming factionalists, and then realize, oh, at least some of these people did nothing wrong, and some of them it was accidental, like Caleb, and yeah, some of them it's because they did the right thing, like For and Triss. There's no significance to the fact that I mentioned his name before hers. I understand some people don't like the idea of the 5 factions. I do think they make more sense than the 12 districts, in addition to being better explained, in movie at least. The book and movie here obviously question the idea of the 5 factions. Some people call it juvenile. I certainly wouldn't go that far. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I do think it's pretty silly to get mad at a piece of media for making a point that, while, obvious, clearly hasn't been taken to heart by those in power. It's like that movie, I want to say it's Rebel Without a Cause, and this is, again, credit to Kyle Colgren. I haven't watched the movie in question, but I would like to. But yeah, there's a scene where an adult says to a teenager, "Why do you young people make the world such a terrible place?" And the young person responds, "We didn't make it." I think it is very noteworthy that under the faction system, those who have the ability to use force are not allowed to also be smart, and those who are smart may be able to order around those who use force, but they are not allowed to use it themselves. These are clearly ways for the dictatorship to keep itself protected. If enough of the people who have the ability to use force are able to properly question the system, they might refuse. This is part of why war propaganda is so intense. If you want to ruin your day, Google, war propaganda. Some of the worst I've seen was from, I forget which of the world wars, but one of the 2. I guess we're... at this point I gotta specify the first 2. If things keep going the way they are, that's not going to be the end of that. But let's see, yeah, and if enough, something we also see with dictatorships is they target the intelligence, the intelligent people, the ones who don't conform to the ones who don't agree with the dictator, and let's see, yeah, so I will talk briefly about the ending being better than that of Hunger Games 1. To be clear, I am not spoiling Hunger Games 1 here. Yeah, I don't think I particularly need to make my case anyway. One of the things to note is Hunger Games was not originally written as a series. It was supposed to be a one-off, and then it got popular, and she wrote more. This, as far as I can tell, was... I forget if this was intended to be a series, or it's just that, the author here was like, I might make more, so I better leave the door open, but, yeah, that is part of it, and, yeah, it has more emotional resonance. I think that part of it is the fact that just this movie focusing on the training leads very naturally into, using the training and also seeing the factions that have been explored over the course of it and the conflict that is brewing, yeah, that comes to a head in a very organic way. It feels like it's unfolding more than that, there was a concept that the author thought would be cool, which I'm not saying that was what happened with Hunger Games. I'm starting to feel, okay, I'll just real quick look. I used to remember her name, but just real quick. So Hunger Games was written by Suzanne Collins. That's it. Suzanne Collins, it's not that she just had an idea she thought was kind of cool. As far as I can tell, she just wasn't trying... The Hunger Games themselves are not meant to be a direct allegory for society in a kind of, 100% realistic way, more that it feels like that. Society, high school, college, these various experiences, where with this, training... Yeah, I forget what they call it, but becoming a member of a faction does feel like, she's 16, so I think it's supposed to be less high school, but, college and, a workplace, and when you have that, it just... Yeah, see, how do I say this without spoiling Hunger Games? The characters that are involved in the climax, the audience have more of a opinion on. They're more fleshed out than the ones that are antagonistic in the climax of Hunger Games 1. And yeah, it makes quite the difference. Now, let's see, I did have some stuff that, let's see, yeah, I don't know how, oh, right, yeah, in addition to university and, work, capitalism and societal expectations are also part of how part of what's going on with the factions. And let's see, I think that might more or less cover, I feel like there was something, maybe not. Right, I did want to say the thing with the, right, here we go, yeah. The factions, that's also part of what I think some people who just say that, oh, the faction system, makes no sense, and this whole thing, first of all, it's not really supposed to, it's supposed to be, we immediately pick up on, oh, that can't be, that you can't organize society like that, and in real life we also see, because in part some, capitalist society does try to put us into these boxes and prevent us from leaving them, and that does lead to a lot of conflict. That's the point. Like, if you want to say, oh, it feels like it's talking down to, I mean, it's written for teenagers. I really don't feel like it's talking down to teenagers. I think some people go into these movies and books and such made for teenagers and act like, oh, I feel like I'm being talked down to. Yeah, because you're an adult. When it comes to teenagers, to be clear, I'm not disparaging them, but it is a scientific fact. Their brain is not fully developed yet. I want to say age 25 is when that's the case. So, yeah, some certain things have to be communicated in a way that might feel, pandering to an adult who thinks that it's aimed at them. But yeah, real quick, some stuff about the basis for the factions. There's philosophical and psychological, Plato's Republic, personality typing, utopian, dystopian, social engineering. There's historical parallels with caste systems such as India and medieval Europe, totalitarian regimes, McCarthyism, persecution of threats. Cultural reflections with modern identity politics, high school cliques, corporate and political specialization. There's a lot of stuff that really, right. So some more stuff about some of the events from the last chunk of the movie. Like, before I get into that, I did want to say the ziplining was so cool. I really appreciate they really milked that, like, not past the point, not to a point where it was like, okay, come on now. They squeezed every single drop out of it to and stopped before it got excessive. Loved it, fantastic. And see, I don't think there's anything quite that tense in the first Hunger Games movie. I again love that movie. I don't think it matches that. Let's see. Yeah, we have the right. I did just briefly want to talk about early in the book and movie, it's said that the idea, Marcus didn't hit his son at all, and then later we realized no, he actually did, and it's one of those things that there's some nuance here because, like, the portrayal of it is more of a character-defining background element than a deep, nuanced exploration. Some of the things it does well is it shows the lasting impact. It shaped Tobias's personality, his distrust of authority, emotional guardedness, desire to be strong and independent. It addresses cycles of appearance versus reality, because Marcus is a respected figure in abnegation, which prides itself on selflessness. The abuse being hidden behind that image adds depth to the idea that some abuse is invisible to the outside world, which is an extremely important thing to understand, because there's so many abuse survivors who feel like they are completely alone because we don't talk about it enough. And I really appreciate it. And it also avoids graphic depictions. The story doesn't exploit the trauma for shock value or go into graphic scenes, a sign of restraint and tastefulness. And honestly, when it came up and they were like, oh, there's no way he's hitting him, I was a little bit worried that they were like, that some people might read the book or watch the movie and be, think that, oh, it's just, there's, when people talk about that, it's not real, it's just false accusations, which is far rarer than, like with rape accusations, it's much, much rarer for those accusations to be false. So, really appreciate that they did get into that. And it also, there is a little bit of more moral gray there. Not child abuse, that is pure evil. but the fact that abnegation is not 100% perfect and good, even though it appears to be, that's an important part of this, is this fact that, no, it doesn't, none of these factions make complete perfect sense. There's no way for any one person or group to embody just one quality like that and no other, and never falter from that quality. And it's such an important thing, because that is something like, I think everyone can relate to, once that you've encountered at least one individual or group of people in your life who, first saw you as one thing, and then for the, you just couldn't change their mind no matter what. If the, like I know people personally who, yeah, they don't know who I'm talking about, so I'm not stroking their ego when I say I know some people who are really, really smart. And yeah, there have been times where they would end up, saying or doing something that maybe wasn't the smartest, because nobody's perfect, and other people would genuinely not believe it. Like, there was, yeah, to the point where they would be like, no, it must have been somebody else who did or said that, or somebody else who convinced them to say or do that thing. And if someone is perceived as being violent, again, someone I know, they couldn't shake that reputation. And the guy, he defended himself. Somebody else attacked him, he defended himself, and from then on, people would, like, avoid him and be like, oh, be careful, he attacks people. And I would tell them, no, it was self-defense. He never attacked. He was a really sweet guy. He just also believed, sometimes you gotta defend yourself. But the only thing people saw was that he also engaged in violence, and the person who attacked him was more respected than he was, and because of that, yeah. Now, so to get back to the element in the movie and book, where it falls short, lacking in deep exploration, doesn't spend much time unpacking the emotional or psychological healing process. It's why it mentions the abuse. It influences him. It's used more as a plot device than a fully explored theme, and that is one of those things you really got to be careful if you're going to bring up such an important... that's an element you really have to take care to treat with the respect that it deserves, because that is a huge problem in real life. Let's see, and yeah, there's little accountability, and other characters don't dwell on it much. Now, let's see, yeah, so the last chunk of the movie, yeah, the thing with the trackers and controlling them, and the real life equivalent of the, here it's sci-fi, it's, so it's like software that goes and reprograms their brain. In real life, what we're seeing is the effects of indoctrination, of propaganda, because there are people, there was a shooter years ago who went into a historical black church and started shooting, just people. He wasn't, like, targeting specific, individuals. That would still be wrong, but no, he was just shooting random people. And a woman pled with him to stop and said, "You don't have to do this," to which he responded, "Yes, I do. You're taking our jobs and raping our women." And he was talking to a woman, so I suppose it's possible that he thought, like, oh, her brothers and, other male relatives, but then why shoot her? What is she, if, because a lot of these bigots, they don't believe that women are capable of rape, which, of course, it does happen. I forget the exact numbers. I'm not great with stats. Please look it up if you want. Just make sure it's an unbiased source. Don't look at, like, conservative source. They tend to lie when it comes to stuff like rape. But yeah, anyway. And also, a lot of these bigots don't think women should work, so does he think that she is taking their jobs? Like, it doesn't make any sense. And how would someone taking a job justify killing them? It's just a mantra. He's learned this from propaganda and, let it simmer until he went and killed people. And let's see, so much going on in that last little chunk of movie. Yeah, I thought it was really compelling when, Trish realizes, okay, I better, fake it, because, Christina's standing there completely stone-faced. Fantastic acting by Zoe Kravitz, because just for so much of the movie, like, she's not always smiling, but there's always something going on in her face, except for when she's under the mind control. I don't know if it was her idea or the director, or, it was someone's idea. She delivers it really well, even if it wasn't her idea. It might not have been. And yeah, Triss literally folds in line, and then you have that other guy's like, oh, what's going on? What are we doing? Divergent. Don't worry about it. We'll settle this, or something like that. And he shoots him in the frickin' face. That was really intense, and a great way to show, they will, if you're not extremely careful, they will eventually discover that you're Divergent, and they will summarily execute you. He didn't have Four's guidance to learn how to blend in like she did. She wouldn't have made it if not for that. The test, the final exam, fantastic. Incorporating all these elements, it's such an excellent ending. The entire last 20 or 30 minutes of this movie are so freaking good, and I really do feel like they do manage to pay off on the training. I understand why some people felt that it got to be too much. I mentioned in the review, that is what I'm referring to. There's a lot of training scenes in this movie. I mean, they are very tense, there is world building. We see, the growing distrust of abnegation, but yeah, I do appreciate, a lot of people prefer to watch, an extended sequence of Hunger Games than dauntless training, and certainly there is a greater immediate threat of death during the Hunger Games than there is during training. Let's see. And yeah, it is just this thing of, like, because the training leads into the climax, you really do need it in there. Hunger Games has some training, doesn't spend forever on it because it doesn't end up making a huge difference. There's some important character stuff in there, but, Hunger Games, in part, like, there's more different, like, other than training, you have them on the train, you have them being trained once they get to the by Haymitch, there's a decent variety of scenes and settings. Now, let's see, in the climax, you have the tactics that are going around shooting people, like during Capture the Flag. You have the knife thrown. You have the the mind control itself is using the fear serum. I swear, Dr. Crane is like giddy, and let's see. I really love the thing with, you're not really going to shoot me. You might be, what was it? Overestimating my character, F you, a-hole. No, F you, a-hole. That was a great little bit. And yeah, the, shooting and fighting. And then, with Peter, it's not like you're going to shoot me. Why does everyone keep saying that? When I listened to that line in the book, I was like, Shailene's gonna kill it with that. That's, and she does. It's such a great, and it's just so freaking satisfying. both with Eric and Peter, because they are so obnoxious, just such hateable characters. Like, fantastic performance. To be clear, once again, I hold no ill will towards either of these actors. You know, there are roles where I thought they were genuinely appealing. You know, their characters were genuinely appealing. You know, I've seen a little bit of interview stuff. They seem genuinely, you know, I'd hang out with them. You know, if when pigs fly, you know. But yeah, just fantastic performance. That is also, you know, if you're a really good person in real life, it can be difficult playing an absolute terrible person. You know, I remain a defender of Jennifer Garner. More recently she did pretty good in Peppermint, but in some of Alias, she's called upon to be like really, you know, unappealing, like really, you know, cruel kind of, you know, and you don't completely buy it. You know, you feel, no, that's still sweet little adorable Jen under there, you know. And let's see, I think that does get us nicely to, let's see. Yeah, the very ending, the last couple of minutes, you know, them on the train, that was such a great, you know, from the start the train has meant freedom, you know, but also tension, because when she first jumps on it's like, finally, you know, no more abnegation, no more all of this, because she doesn't fully feel like abnegation, you know. And then, you know, after a little while she realizes, oh wow, Dauntless is a lot more intense than I thought it was going to be. It's very, you know, crap, did I already say boot camp? You know, it's, yeah, yeah. Anyway, let's see, what was the other thing with that? So, you know, after a while, her being on the train, or possibly not making it to the train, can, you know, be threatening. And then here at the end, it is a mix, because she's getting away from the, you know, the controlling government, but to what? You know, it's dangerous out there. Take this. And let's see, I think that does bring us to, so yes, there's basically two more things I wanted to say. So the final exam with the, you know, the fear, and then we see her work through the fears. You know, earlier we saw her handle them Divergent, and now, you know, and then Ford trained her to handle them Dauntless, and now she's handling them Dauntless. That was such a strong, you know, and you have this thing of, you know, having to kill, you know, innocent people, even, you know, her own family, and it's this thing of like, she realizes it has to be a, you know, simulation, but she knows she has to protest, because Dauntless would protest but eventually agree. And the cut, you know, from her shooting, and, you know, Janine's right there very close to her, and then she wakes up and Janine is standing way over there, just very, very quickly telling the audience that was a simulation. That wasn't at all, that didn't happen for real, you know. The sexual assault by Four, I think if they had spent forever on it, or if it was like, if they didn't already have such a strong relationship, because it's one of those things, it's like, it's a fear of hers, because she wants him to take things slow, and he did already, you know, he immediately accepted that. You know, the moment she said, I don't want to go too fast, he was like, I respect that, you know, good guy. See, whenever misogynists say, you know, every man in every movie is just not a role model anymore, I mean, this is one of, I love finding cases like this, because this is very much, you know, there's a lot of women who find his character very attractive, and he is actually, I mean, I'm not saying he's like perfect, but when she says stop, he stops, you know, when it comes to sex. And let's see, I think that might, I thought that was a really great, you know, trick they pulled, because he does walk up and she's like, please tell me you didn't see that, and he's like, would you feel better if I said no, you know. And then it's like, okay, now shoot your parents, shoot your family, you know. So we think, okay, the simulation is over, just very nicely done. I love that they do, like, it's very A Nightmare on Elm Street. We don't know, sometimes there just is a simulation and we only realize it a little bit into it. You know, that was also maybe especially when she like walks into a room and all the Dauntless are like staring at her. At first I was like, oh no, you know, is this like, but then, you know, once there's glass right in front of her, oh, it must be a simulation. But the fact that we get this moment, these second, just mere seconds, but it really works, where everyone is just staring at her and just like really uncomfortable, you know, this kind of social isolation, which is a major, you know, she is afraid of being alone in, you know, these both book and movie now, and not fitting in, you know, and that is a major fear for teenagers. Let's see, I think that might cover the test itself. Let's see. The oh right, yeah, earlier when I loved when I think her name is Natalie, Triss's mom, you know, pulls her aside and talks, and then, you know, a Dauntless shows up. It's like, what are you doing? You know, and Triss's mom is already gone because she really can't be seen there. And then the Dauntless just follows up with, the trucks are loaded, come on, you know, because the way he says it and the exact words, it's just vague enough. It's very Prison Breaky. It's just vague enough that you think, you know, oh, you think it's going one way and then it goes another, and you can accept that it goes another, and you were convinced that it was going one way, you know, very, very nicely. You think he's like, you're not supposed to be here, I'm gonna have to report you, and it's gonna be like, what, she's gonna like fight him, or what, you know, how is she gonna get out of this? But no, he was saying, what are you doing? We're waiting for you, come on, you know, just very, very nice. Which is also, you know, the fact that he didn't see Natalie there means that, yeah, he was just like, what's this Dauntless doing? Come on, man. We have a schedule, you know. Just, yeah, it's a dictatorship. I'm sure they probably have a, crap. I set it up and then I forget the word. Yeah, gonna have to move on. Word is not coming to me. Anyway, yeah, let's see. Yeah, there at the very end, her having to fight for, which is, of course, you know, there's been this tension around him, you know, early on. Yeah, there's been some tension with him throughout, but after a while it morphed into romantic tension. Early on, yeah, he's very guarded, and, you know, he, like, the first time that the first time she speaks directly to him, he's like, what makes you think you're allowed to talk to me? You know, it's something like along those lines, you know. And yeah, you know, we know he's very physically capable, and now that's being turned against her, you know, and that is something that I understand a lot of women do fear, you know, intimate partner violence, you know, being attacked by a man that they trust and let their guard down around, and it's impossible to never let your guard down around, you know, any man. So, you know, yeah, Rebecca Watson actually did a really solid video relatively recently. Something like Thunderfoot. Yeah, honestly, if you search her channel for Thunderfoot and just click on the most recent video, that's gonna, yeah. It was an old clip, but there was something where she really nailed this, yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate, and she's using the tactics that he taught her. And, you know, there's a part where she, like, uses her weight against him, and that is one way that someone of, you know, relatively small stature, not a huge amount of muscle mass, can be effective against someone with more muscle mass. You know, let's see. How? It's simple physics. And, let's see. Yeah, the bit with the train. I appreciate that, you know, she has to get past Christina, and it's like, I hope she doesn't notice, you know, and that's also where you have one guy with, like, multiple piercings, and, like, you know, I forget, there's something on his head, I forget if it was tattoo or specific hairdo or whatever, but yeah, you know, some of the most intense, and, you know, she walks up and, you know, reaches her, you know, her hand is right next to his, and he's stone-faced, and then he does hold her hand, and it's like this relief of, okay, he was really faking it like she was, but, you know, he can't exactly Yeah, I mean, I guess he was also not sure if she was faking it, I think, is the... Yeah. Let's see, and yeah, it's such an excellent point, because that is exactly right. The dictatorships try to control who they can and destroy who they can't. There are so many cases in various dictatorships where people who did not conform were punished severely, sometimes executed. And let's see, yeah, once 4 is brought back out of it, some really great action, and Triss using the fear toxin against Janine was such an excellent, the taste of her own medicine kind of thing. Really love Kate Winslet's performance. Like, holy crap. It's like if Rose never met Jack and became just as cold as, as I can't believe I'm blanking on his name, but the Billy Zane character, he definitely wanted her to be more restrained and cold. Let's see, I think that might... Yeah, the line about, I appreciate you're willing to die for your values, but so am I, and yeah, the fear, and then he programs, so she'll take the order, and she does turn it off, and, again, fantastic acting by Zoe Kravitz. Christina's face, go from stone face to like, what are we doing? Holy crap. And she doesn't even have to say anything because everyone's waking up. But again, the fact that we're focusing on her because we've spent so much of the movie with her character, just fantastic. Yeah. And let's see, I appreciate. I thought they did a good job here at the last chunk of the movie of making sure that, like, the only times where we're kind of savoring the violence carried out by Triss and 4 is when it's against people who know exactly what they're doing. Peter, Eric, and Max. It's like, yes, take them out. You gotta, like, not because of like, they personally deserve, but they're hurting people. They're hurting a lot of people. If you take them out, you'll be able to save those people, But when they're shooting Dauntless, who are under mind control, it doesn't, like, linger and really, like, have us, like, cheering or something. Let's see. I guess Triss's dad really hoped that plot armor was, like, a genetic trait and he was the one carrying it. I think I know I'm joking. Is obviously him being courageous, and it's great to see, or selfless. I think that might more or less cover. Yeah, I thought it was really, really effective when we saw, the mind control Dauntless going around, rounding up people, taking them out of their homes, and they're about to, it's going to lead to the deaths, certainly, some of them end up dead, and if nothing is done to stop, clearly many of them will indeed die, even though they're innocent. It's just they belong to a group that the ruler thinks, you're in my way, sir. Yeah, the way it's filmed and edited, like, I really got vibes of, Nazi Germany, and let's go with Trump's America. With Nazi Germany, it would be Jewish people, and with Trump, it would be immigrants.